Good evening, everyone. Hello. Is this mic working? Yes. Oh, yes. Good. Fantastic. Well, isn't it wonderful to be here celebrating 150 years of Queen Margaret with such a brilliant piece of theatre. I enjoyed it so much. And I just think we should start by giving a huge round of applause to everyone involved. Thank you, dear. To all of the cast, of course, and to the two people who are going to be talking to me tonight. Stef Smith, the writer of the play. Round of applause for Stef, I think. And to Bruce Strachan, lecturer in acting at QM, who directed it. So well done. I'm Joyce McMillan. I'm the theatre critic of The Scotsman. And of course, I've had a bit to do with Queen Margaret over the years. First of all, reviewing many of the students who have trained there as they've come out into the acting profession in Scotland and always made a fantastic contribution to it. Then I had the honour of being awarded an honorary doctorate by QM back in 2000 for all my work trudging around Scotland and seeing theatre. So that was a very, very memorable day in the McEwan Hall. And then in the mid-2000s, I was invited by the then principal, Tony Cohen, to become a visiting professor for a while. And that was when I first met Stef, because Stef was one of my students then. Heaven knows what I taught my students, but I always think that, well, many of them have gone on to have very successful careers in theatre, something which is not that easy to do. And many of them have managed to do so here in Scotland. And I think, with hindsight, that what I mainly taught them was to be enthusiastic about theatre and to feel that it was really a destiny worth pursuing and an art form that can, on occasions, change lives, if not exactly change history. So I've been very privileged to have these contacts and involvements with QM over the years. And I've always really loved the kind of slogan of the institution, which is this idea of head, heart and hand. I remember talking about it when I got my honorary degree, talking about it in the McEwan Hall, about how interesting and powerful it was to have an academic institution that had these strong elements, both of practical skill and emotional intelligence in what it tried to impart to its students, and in its history, woven into its history, in just the way that Stef showed us tonight. So it's great to have the chance to talk to you both about this play now with the same title, Head, Heart and Hand. So Stef, when you were first approached to do this, to write a play to celebrate the 150th anniversary of QM, what were your thoughts? How did you decide to tackle it?
Yeah, I mean, when I was approached, I'm a sucker for working with students. I find it very intoxicating and hopeful. And so as soon as I was approached, I said yes straight away. And then I thought, how the fuck am I going to do this? And luckily, I had the support of the team who are looking after the anniversary, including Ray, who's here, and Donna. And I got access to the archive. And they were already experts in the story of QMU. And so luckily they gave me a bit of a few key points along the way to look at. And it became very clear that I wanted to acknowledge the whole history of the piece, but also what's interesting about this project is it had certain parameters. So for example, there was going to be 12 actors. It was only one of two shows that they were going to do this year, the next one being the showcase, so their only full show. And so I felt, Bruce didn't say this, but I felt like I had a responsibility to help showcase the performers in a way that felt equal, in a way that was played to their strengths, and but also challenged them. I mean, they might disagree, but so the sort of set of parameters on this project were very specific. And also, you know, worth saying is, I love my time at QMU, but also I didn't want to create a piece of propaganda. You know, this isn't the sort of brochure, but also it didn't. You know, I wanted to ensure that there was a balance, I guess, of the stories that I acknowledged, and the small ways in which it's tapped into the life of Edinburgh as well. And we had a couple of developments along the way. One last spring, which is where I met the students for the first time. And that was great. That felt like a real key element. It was like a missing part of the puzzle to see who these humans were that we were going to collaborate with. And then went away, did the research, and then we did another development in October with a not dissimilar version of this script that was performed today. So yeah, that's a sort of sketch of our process.
And did you know much of this history before you started doing your research for the play?
Nothing. I knew nothing.
Really?
Yeah, nothing. I felt so foolish. I was like, because I did 2 years at the Castorphin campus and then 2 years in Musselburgh, and I knew nothing. And so when I started accessing this material, I thought, how extraordinary, because academic institutions don't generally have positive origin stories. It's linked to colonialism, it's linked to imperialism, they're quite often shady beginnings. And actually what's nice about Queen Margaret is it really genuinely was a positive start. It was so hopeful. And I thought that's such a clear sort of through line through this piece of hope. And it said in the play, I do believe education is an act of hope, and that sort of became a through line. But I knew nothing. I knew nothing. I knew the only three things that I knew were that the curly fries were really delicious. I knew that it was possible to get scurvy because the flatmate of Alex Bird, who runs Tortoise and Nutshells, his flatmate got scurvy in year 1. And I know that every lecturer wears a lanyard. Those were my 3 starting points. So everything else came from research.
And I mean, it is quite a story, and quite a sort of woman's story at the outset, which again is quite unusual. I mean, you're looking at an institution that was founded by women, for women originally, with the idea of having this cookery school in Edinburgh. But just before I come to Bruce, what I felt watching it, Stef, was that, obviously a lot of that was covered, and there were the kind of fast-moving sequences where, you could see sort of history going past quickly, and Edinburgh changing and the world changing. But there are also like these kind of set pieces where there was some kind of conflict or struggle going on. I mean, obviously there was a very moving one at the end of the Second World War, but the ones to do with the institution more, where the kind of conflict right at the beginning about whether women should be learning, the same things as really intelligent men got to learn, medicine and law and all of that, or whether it was a bad thing to be teaching them cooking. Yes. I mean, and that was a very live debate, I think, even at the time when it was launched. And then in the middle, the kind of sit-in debate about student radicalism and how that affected people, and then towards the end, the debate during COVID about the purpose of nursing, which has obviously been a very important. So I thought that there was a kind of element in it of you feeling that it's important to acknowledge struggle as part of the story of an educational institution. Yes,
because I think through struggle comes change, and it means that it's in conversation with the moment it's in. Like, it's not a static institution. It's always in conversation, because it's such an interesting time being a student those years. I mean, I was a student sort of during the typical age bracket of 18 to 22, and you're so different from at 22 to who you are at 18. You're like a whole other human, and I think it's sort of extraordinary to sort of straddle those years and the battles you face on a personal level, and then you've got growing pains, if you will. And I think to place that within the institution sort of setting felt important. And what was interesting, at an alumni event that we attended back in the summer, somebody came up to us and was raging about the sit-ins in the 70s. They went, you know it better than I do, but they went, "You drama students, you got on the way of my exam." And that was, that's almost 50 years ago. And the anger was still so hot from that sit-in. And I do, speaking, I got the privilege of speaking to some of the staff on the nursing course about their time during COVID. And I had to try and not cry when I was speaking to them, because it was so extraordinary. And not a story that I knew either, about how they had to ensure the safety of those students was remarkable, and something I could see that they were still processing, and we're all still processing. And I think to honour what those, those were majority young women who were 18, who were going out in those wards with very little training, doing extraordinary things. And those figures are true that are in the play. If that's not worth writing about, I don't know what is.
Absolutely, yes. Let's give her a round of applause. So Bruce, what did you think when you saw this script beginning to take shape? Was it what you expected, or in what ways did it surprise you?
Well, I was first delighted because I first worked with Stef when she was a student. So when I was
lecturing,
I know. So I was just thrilled to have that sort of, it's loop. I mean, there's a lot of loops in what happens in education. So that it just is a sort of an interesting loop for Stef to come back, and now she's taught me lots while she's been here. So that sort of bit of it was really interesting. It was similar to what Stef said. I think learning about the institution and how much there is, in its history was fascinating to me. I didn't know much about it either, so to go through that sort of archive process in the history and start to understand what it's about and start to deal with the sort of debate about, well, what is education and what's its value and all of those kinds of things. I mean, we had various coffees and scones where we talked about what was going on, and the lecturer scene is very live in terms of the conversations that are going on. I'm sure some of my colleagues in here will have recognised some of those school forums or divisional meetings that have, where are the scones? So it was fascinating to see sort of Stef's journey to come back and to start to try to weave that story together and be able to, make sure that the actors all had something that they could really do. So it was fascinating to see how that started to evolve.
And was there anything about it that struck you as unexpected? You thought, oh, look what she's done there.
I wouldn't say unexpected. I think we went a few different sort of roads. So the 40 scene was sort of one of the last ones to go in. That was probably the last scene. So we'd gone a slightly different. There was only 3 eras, and then we, in discussion, and Stef felt that actually it would be easier to sort of work and nicer to have 4, and then it sort of made it, have that sort of fuller sort of process through time. And
also allowed each of the actors to have more meaty roles within the scenes.
A meaty role for everyone.
Exactly.
So to keep that balance and to make sure that it still has a through line, it's been I'm sure the students would say the same. It's been a real honour to be to watch it progress. To see a live script, to have a real living playwright in the building, not one you're blowing the sort of dust off the book. And to be able to have a kind of discussion and a back and forth about it is probably the most interesting thing. I think.
How long have you had to work on it?
Well, it was probably about a year ago it first became a
But with
thing.
the actors, I mean, when did you cast it?
So we did a script development at the end of last year. So at the end of their 3rd year, we had a couple of days with Stef where we read the draft at the time. Yeah, about April last year. So we did 2 or 3 days then. Then Stef went and wrote a draft based on that, and we had conversations over the summer about what we might do, and then we came back in October and had 4 or 5 days again, script development, talking about it, practicing it, trying some different ideas, and then the students came back about the 14th of January, something like that. So we've had 4 weeks of rehearsals. Right. So we tried to keep it as a professional. Kind of, similar as possible whilst working within the confines of it.
Well, I mean, you say that, but they've only had 2 days of tech, which is extraordinary to get the show looking like this in 2 days.
It's quite fast moving and complicated the way the scenes flow into each other.
It's extraordinary, the level of work that's gone into this.
Yeah, so well done everyone who's involved in that, including the team. And what has it been like performing it here, Bruce? Because this is quite, it's not a huge theatre, the Traverse, and I know from my own experience of doing things here that it's only got about 250 seats, but it's not a small space. It's actually I always think of it as being like a little opera house. You almost have to more sort of sing than speak to make a full impact in here, particularly when you're not mic'd, as the cast weren't tonight. So what has it been like working here to kind of get the show pitched right for this pretty special space?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the challenges. We don't have an equivalent space at QM. The rehearsal rooms that we have aren't as big as this floor, so we have to do a lot. I mean, it's part of actors training. You have to learn how to kind of replicate sort of moving across. They get good voice training and movement training from my colleagues Marion and Stephanie. So we sort of know that this was coming. When we do our showcase at the end of the year, we let our third years come and perform as part of that. That's on the 8th of April. Book your dates, come and see it. Tickets are available from the Travers box office. So the third years do a little performance then. So these guys all did a little performance then. So they get a little taster of it, of working in here then. So they're not being completely exposed to it for the first time. But this is the first time they've had a chance to work with the full tech and the DSMs and the great team that's upstairs. It's the first time they've had to do it. And as Steph says, you know, they arrived here on Tuesday morning, and 2 days of standing around, lights getting focused and all that kind of stuff. So we've had to work really quickly to try to adapt to this room, because it's a big old barn.
Yeah, it is quite a barn of space, and we're now going, despite the fact that we don't have any roving mice, to attempt to see everybody in the space, which I can't see anyway because I've got eye problems at the moment, and see whether there's anyone in the audience who'd like to make a comment or ask a question or have a memory even of QM over the years that they'd just like to share with us on this occasion, because it's quite a special night in a lot of ways. Would anyone like to say anything or ask a question?
There's one up there.
I'm not going to be able to see somebody.
Memories.
Here's the lady.
Memories.
Yeah.
We're very, very old drama students. We sat in.
Excellent. Well done.
Connections and things. And some of my best friends were the girls who wore the mop caps and the aprons and everything. And I spoke to one yesterday and I said, I'm going to the Travers to say that. And I said, what are your memories? And she said, apart from these bloody awful mop caps, she said it was the terrible drama students always showing off in the refectory. And trying to get, must be a theme here, scones. Trying to get to the scones. And I thought, it was funny when they said scones and things, I thought, I've just imagined a girl's going to come out with a mop cap on. But he didn't doing that, thank goodness. It was interesting because it was about connections, and these people that we connected with in the we're still connected with, you know, in the whatever's we're in now, you know, and I thought that was a different thing because we were all different courses and things, you know, every doing different things, and these drama students kind of thrown in all like everybody. It was funny that the sort of slightly more prim and proper, I beg my pardon, you know, girls and boys accepted us, and it was great, and they still accept us today, you know.
I think thank you for that. I think it's one of the real special things about QM is that the students will tell you some of them live with nursing students, and they live with podiatrists, and they live with paramedics, and unlike maybe a sort of more conservatoire style place where they just live with actors and other actors, it's one of the brilliant things about QM is that there is a wider sort of family to make those connections. So we do have.
But also as a gesture, it's suggesting that drama students are as vital as nurses, right? Like in order to have a healthy society, you need all those things. You need the clowns and the writers along with the blood takers and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else got?
I remember when the Duchess of Gloucester was a patron.
Right.
Margaret.
Oh yes.
And drama students would go down to the refectory, and all the students had made copious quantities of caviar and aspic. We lived on caviar and aspic for 3 or 4 days. On the menu.
And of course there's all the different places that QM has been in Edinburgh as well. You know, it's got this association with that beautiful site on Corstorphine Hill, you know, and then the Gateway in Leith Walk for a while for the drama students, and now out at Musselburgh where it
There's questions at the back.
are there? Well, I'm
We are alumni of Athol Crescent. It's funny how scones have come up. I had a friend recently, and I rang her about 20 minutes away, and I just looked, I before I actually got to her house. But the point of this conversation, which we've enjoyed this enormously, I would like to pick up on one very small technicality.
Go on.
Glasgow has a Doe School. Edinburgh has a College of Domestic Science.
Yeah, you know, you say that. You say that, but my friend who came last night said her granny used to call it the Doe School.
Yeah.
So it is a thing. It is a thing called the. No, it's definitely a thing. Two Doe schools, I guess.
Interesting.
Bruce and Stef are going to have to tell me where the hands are up if there are
there's
any
one
hands.
One
lady in the
here.
middle.
Yeah.
I'm an interloper. I wasn't actually at QM, but I was a higher education journalist, and I was delighted to serve on the University College for a while.
Ah.
I can remember when I started, which was in the 1970s, the university, of course, was at Kirkstorfen at that point, and I was very keen on covering, you know, anything potentially nefarious that was going on. And I would discover that, you know, the staff were agitating at Queen Margaret, and I would phone up and I would be summoned to see the principal. I don't know if anybody remembers Claudine Morgan. Claudine Morgan at that point. And the secretary, I think, was Bernard Donahue. There was and I would be summoned and I would go in and I would say, you know, I believe there's all this agitation going on and all these terrible things happening. And what would happen would be they would feed me scones. And what was in these scones? I would come back to the office thinking, those scones were lovely. I've been given absolutely no information.
Scones spiked with tranquil.
Yeah. There's another
Can you
question.
see Bruce?
Yeah.
Somebody more up the back, yeah?
Yeah.
And there were 600 women and one man, and he was allowed to wear trousers in the kitchen, and the girls, the women, weren't. We weren't allowed to wear. We were hardly allowed to wear trousers. We did a load of posters, 6 foot high, of him in his chef's whites with no trousers.
Good.
You made your point. What happened? Did they let you wear
Sorry.
trousers after? Sorry, Bruce.
There's another question. Sorry, I was just.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about the archive, and I was wondering about the archive at QMU and how comprehensive it was, or how much you had to go outside to that. And I suppose it's got me thinking about the importance of archival material in universities for something like this. But my question is, you know, how much did you use it, and how complete was it?
Did everybody hear that? It's a question about the archives and about the importance of archives.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, on the end of your row is Ray, who is like single-handedly the man, you know, looking after the archive. He's not. I should also point out, he's not an archivist. It's like he's really taken it on, and it's thanks to him that much of that material has floated to the surface. Because I'll be honest, forgive me, the archive is a sort of bizarre room off the library. It's not a sort of spectacular thing. It is like a broom cupboard with lots of boxes, and there's gold dust in there in regards to the history of this institution. So if I would plead that it was maybe better looked after, if I could, because the because there is history there, and I think it's patchy. There's one artifact which isn't really dramatic enough to make it in, where are these incredible books of all the students from, I think, maybe about 1910, and it's got little pictures of all the students, and then it's got a write-up of the students, and a huge amount of nuns went to Queen Margaret, a lot of nuns. Nuns, yeah. And it's just a really interesting artifact as much as anything, and how they wrote about the women, and how some of them so clearly didn't want to learn domestic sciences but were there to do so. So yeah, it's a hodgepodge, if I'm being totally honest. But yeah, it's thanks to Ray that it's in the state it's in, and I got to access it, so thank you, Ray.
Yeah.
Is that another
Any more
question
for any
here?
more? Oh yeah, there's a gentleman in the second row.
I wanted to ask, where did the idea for the movement come from? Because I thought that was a really interesting thing to add, and it meant that most of the students were on stage most of the time. And I wondered if that was why it was there, but it was a really interesting element as a background to the story. Where did that come from?
A lot from our brilliant movement director, Stephanie Arsoska, who's up the back. So a lot of the movement stuff was the script, there's lots of little sections which are sort of chorus section that Steph's written. So in the text, there's hyphens and different, and then new lines. And in the sort of stage direction, Stef said every hyphen is a new voice or a new way of shaping the voice, and that was the instructions that are in the text. And so we just wanted to find a way to speak to those sections, to keep them alive, to let the words work, but also to keep the sort of flow of the whole thing, to try to feel like it was organic going all the way through the years, to show the passing of time and all that kind of stuff, and obviously try to make it kind of interesting and creative, through the process. So a lot of trial and error, lots of different ways we went through various different options of how that chorus might work, but we wanted to use that sort of slightly stylized movement style to sit again. Yeah. Great. Yeah, it's great. And
it enabled you to move swiftly through the bits where the years were passing, and looked brilliant. Yeah. And I also thought the words and the movement really blended. I mean, well, not blended is the wrong word, but they really worked really well together. Yeah. Okay, anyone else burning to make a comment? Or there's someone?
There's two. Well, let's go here and then we'll go up there. All right.
Right, and that'll probably have to be enough.
Yeah.
We don't want to keep you from the bar.
I'm a second year in QMU, and I studied theatre and film, and it's the only course of its kind in Scotland. And I don't know if Jay Byrne is still here, but I remember in my first year he read QMU for the girls, and I was like, yes. And then it's really exciting to know that the course that I'm doing, being the only course of its kind in Scotland, and then my uni actually was for the girls, which is a really exciting thing to learn. And so I really enjoyed learning the history of all the courses being added and how the cuts went to drama, and then it didn't go to drama because, again, the only course of its kind. And that's just a really interesting fact to know.
Yeah, did everyone hear that? It's about the fact that say what your course was again? Theatre and film course is the only one of its kind in Scotland, and she's just saying that as a student it was really exciting for her to know that, and also to know a bit about the history of a college that was founded for girls and women, and to encourage them to extend their skills in every way. Do you want to add up?
Yeah, it's probably just on that. I mean, it's still very predominantly women's college, isn't it? I can't have the statistic. You remember 70% or something?
I mean, when I went in 2005, it was, people still said it was the girls' university. It's still very in the air. Well, it was then, as the thing that, predominantly female.
But wonderful that the theatre and film department is still going strong. Right, one more.
There was one up here.
Could I just say thank you for a wonderful evening. I'm Joyce McMillan, no relation. I happen to be promised to be Slothian, and I was educated in Ross High, and my domestic science teacher was a graduate of Athol Crescent. That's what she talked about. And on Shrove Tuesday, around 1968, she picked up my pancake rather absent-mindedly and used it to wipe down the work. In all seriousness, I want to say thank you for being an important part of Estonian. But my question is, what are your hopes for the future for QMU?
I've got one.
That's a big question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about the future too before we finish, because at the end, you make it clear that there's still, in a way, institutions like universities, and particularly a university like QM, which really tries to have a wide mix of students, and to not be an institution of privilege. It's a struggle. It's always been a struggle for them to exist, to get the funding they really need to be able to have the widest possible intake of students. And these times, have their own problems. So, in the light of that sort of final scene that you wrote, Stef, what are your hopes and what are your fears?
I think the fears are obvious.
Yeah.
That the institution will struggle, and that the cuts will make the courses impossible to run in a meaningful way. That's my fear, of course, and the fact that drama is often targeted. And I should say it's a real, I'd really like to thank John, who commissioned me to write this play, and for the university in general for making it possible. I think the gesture itself is hopeful.
Yes.
So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to tell this story. My hope, and it's, I was going to, maybe not a selfish one, but new writing is the lifeblood of Scottish theatre, as I'm sure you can attest, Joyce.
Indeed.
Giving students the opportunity to work with a living playwright is doubling their ability to be hired after university. It's teaching them ways of being in the rehearsal room. It's teaching them things beyond the set texts. My hope is that this is not the first of its kind. The last of its kind. It can be the first, but it can't be the last of its kind. Because the students need to know how to work with playwrights. Because the chances are the first thing that they'll go and do as their first gig is go and be in a room with a living writer who's working on a play. And showing those students how to do that is one of the most vital things you can give them. And so for the course to be able to continue to do that is vital. It makes the course vital. And unfortunately, we're in a time where courses need to make themselves vital in order to stay. And so my hope is that somewhere someone's going, okay, let's commission a play for next year. And it continues onwards because it's how you make the students thrive after their studies, which ultimately is the aim of the institution. So that's my hope.
Absolutely.
Very good.
And thanks, Stef, for all your fabulous new writing. I was just thinking earlier of all the wonderful Stef Smith plays that I've seen, here at the Traverse or around the Traverse. Your very first huge hit, Roadkill, which was actually not in the Traverse, but in a flat somewhere in it. Fantastic play. And then later on, the one called Enough about air hostess. I mean, Stef has gone on to become one of the most successful writers, I think, ever to emerge.
You have to say that.
QM
You have to say
course.
that. I'm right here. No, I'm joking.
No, it's true. She has had a fantastic career so far, and she did write the best essays I had during the whole of my 3 years at QM. It was hard to follow.
Yeah. I wish my mum was here.
I was like, who's this wee Stef Smith? I'm really right. Anyway,
thank you. Thanks, Joyce.
Bruce, what are your hopes and fears for the future?
Well, I mean, it's very sort of similar to Steph. It's been absolutely a joy to work with Steph, so I would totally echo that. I think having this, coming out into the world and having this chance to have a community and to see so many colleagues who I don't even know, many of whom I just pass in the corridor from the broader university, to come out and support that has been thrilling. It is a big investment for the university, particularly at a time of it's heavy out there. But what it does, the repercussions it have. I was sort of sitting tonight thinking in the COVID scene that we wouldn't have been able to be in this room and to do that. So just to sort of remember that the privilege of that kind of community and sort of theatre and for us to come and just do this, I think would be my hope. The more of this we can do, the better for the students. Ultimately, that's the most important thing. But I think it's good for QM to be out there.
It's also good for the industry at a time where commissionings are dwindling. As far as new writing in Trav 1. This adds a huge percentage amount to it. So it's like it feeds the industry as well. It's not just, it's beyond the students, it's beyond QM, it's feeding it.
It's a really important part of the interface between the live theatre industry and QM, which, is and has always been terribly important. I mean, one last thing that occurs to me is something I think you mentioned earlier, Steph, which is the impact of having an institution like QM on Edinburgh as a city. I mean, as a citizen of Edinburgh, I feel it. I feel that having a university like this, that has this practical, creative and intellectual elements to it, is incredibly healthy for Edinburgh. It's always been healthy from Edinburgh since the first day they started cooking good food, in the school of, what did you call it, rather than Dole School, in the School of Domestic Science in Edinburgh. And I feel it's an institution that has always been good for Edinburgh. So thank you very much to both of you. Thank you to QM for being QM for 150 years. Just from me, thank you to QM for inviting me to be involved tonight, and thank you to the Traverse for being great hosts. They are always a Thanks, Paul.
So for those who don't know me, I'm Paul Grice. I'm the principal, the latest principal of Queen Margaret University. I've got to start with a few thank yous. First and foremost to Stef, brilliant play. It was inspiring to meet you. Was it October last year when you?
That's right,
So, I've been excited ever since to see what it would turn out. Bruce, fantastic job. Joyce, great supporter. She does loads of things for us, and it's a privilege to know you. I thought the actors were just fantastic tonight, and even as a non-professional critic, I noticed that you'd given them all great parts, and I think that is fantastic, and none of them let you down. Thanks to the wonderful people here at the Traverse. I love coming here, and it's fantastic. Just a couple of reflections. We've all got scone stories. When I came to be interviewed for the job of principal, they put us, all the candidates, in individual rooms, and they kept bringing us scones. And I was panicking, so I thought, if you don't eat all the scones, does that mean you don't get the job? And the QM scones are huge. I ate 5 scones that day. 5 scones. I think I got the job because I ate more scones than anyone else. A couple of the reflections. That hope was something I came to, and what I loved about it, it was not a sort of blind hope. It was a questioning hope, a thoughtful hope, and I was really pleased you put that bit at the end. Not just because I'm also sort of very actively engaged and very worried about the funding of universities throughout the UK, but particularly in Scotland. And we, I think we have to really work hard together. There isn't an us and them. We might have different perspectives. But I think looking back 2 years ago when we sat around a table and thought, what would we do to commemorate our 150th anniversary? And very quickly, colleagues said, well, we're a creative institution. We should create something. And there's 2 things I'm particularly proud of. One is a marvellous piece of public art in the university by a local artist, and she's brilliant. And second was a play. And it's 2 years later, here we are. And it took just a tiny bit of courage because, even then money was tight and think, what would they think? And actually, no, we've got to remember that. So I think your challenge to us to remember to be brave, and I can't promise to commission a play every year, but maybe we should, maybe start from the other end and say, what would it take to do that, to create a new piece of work? Joyce and I come across each other when the Scotsman for the new writing around the fringe. Yeah. And that's a marvellous thing. It's the best thing I ever did. Joyce, little story. Joyce just sort of emailed me one day and just said, you're going to say no, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Would you sponsor these Fringe First Awards? I'm glad I took the call. And we did. And it's marvellous. And we get the privilege to go along and see these wonderful actors acting in wonderful pieces of original work, And it only happens because somebody somewhere says, we're going to make that happen. And final thought, I actually found the whole thing quite emotional. Partly from a personal point of view, because the weight of responsibility has been the latest in a long line of principles. But more than anything, it's emotional because it matters. Education matters, learning matters, that marvellous story. And of course, there's a nice Scotsman link there, because the advert which kicked it all off was placed in the Scotsman newspaper. And isn't it amazing how just a couple of amazing women put it in a newspaper 150 years later of a university? It's quite a staggering thing. So thanks to everybody for coming. Thanks to sort of Stef for creating a marvellous thing, Bruce for your direction, Joyce as always adding some stardust to the event. Everyone who's been involved, and the bar remains open for the next hour or two. So I hope if you've got time, go upstairs, have a drink, and I'll look forward to chatting to some of you. So thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.